It's a pleasure to be here at I-House. I've had occasion to be here a number of times, and actually the Goldman School had its commencement exercises here last year. So my job is to talk a little bit about challenges to the American foreign policy. And of course, it's a huge subject, and I'm only going to open up a few topics and then take your comments and questions. I've actually noticed in most of my years at Berkeley, and I've been here since 1998, I don't get too many questions after I speak, only criticisms. So I'm available. I'm ready. I have a flak jacket on. I can put on a helmet if necessary. Okay, let me begin with a little bit of interplay between politics and policy. When a president runs for office, and we're in the midst of a presidential campaign that's beginning now, he or she makes promises. And the promises are not frivolous. They become important benchmarks for what the ingoing policies would be. And if you recall, in the 2008 presidential election, President Obama said that Iraq was the wrong war and Afghanistan was the right war. That we needed to be in Afghanistan to suppress Taliban, al-Qaeda elements that could reconstitute a capability that could attack the United States like they did on 9/11, only perhaps even more in a more devastating fashion. Iraq was the wrong war. It was a diversion of resources. Saddam Hussein, who was a tyrant, was not a threat to the United States, and so forth. And this was one effort also to differentiate himself from Hillary Clinton. Now, whatever you think of that dichotomy, once he was elected, that became an important launching point for, in some ways, the most prominent, visible, perhaps important issue he had to deal with. We were fighting in two wars. We're still fighting in those wars. The Afghan War, now over 10 years old, is the longest war in American history. The Iraqi War is also, because it's 8.5 years, is the second longest war in American history. It's taken a tremendous toll on a small number of Americans. How many of you have had any experience with Afghanistan or Iraq or the war of any kind? A couple of people. Actually, 3 or 4 people in an audience this size is larger than the population as a whole. It's far less than 1% of the American population has any contact at all with anyone who's involved with the military, with Iraq, with Afghanistan, or any place else. So our detailed knowledge is flimsy or remote. It comes, of course, from many media sources, and we form our own judgments. But we don't have a lot of sort of first-hand knowledge. We've also not been asked to sacrifice, really, by either the Bush administration or the Obama administration. So we don't feel it ourselves. Now, perhaps where we do feel it is in economic issues, and we'll come to that later. So in my own case, I was a political appointee. Now, I don't know if you know, some of you may know a lot about this, but others don't. So let me give you a short summary. I don't know if Bob Reich did this when he spoke here. Probably not. But he and I are colleagues at the Goldman School. We've known each other since 1979. So during a political campaign, people volunteer or are asked to volunteer to help out. And they're divided in basically two groups, policy and politics. So there's some people saying, you know, should we put more resources into New Hampshire versus Iowa? That's politics. Some people say, what should the candidate say about position X? That's policy. And the policy is divided into many, many, many teams, each of which looks at different issues in their area of expertise and is only integrated by the very top of the campaign. When Obama declared his candidacy in January or February 2007, shortly thereafter, I was called and asked if I would participate as a policy advisor in that campaign. I had been active in the Clinton campaign and was in the Clinton administration. I was not in the Bush administration, although I was a consultant in the Rumsfeld Pentagon on national security issues, but in a completely apolitical sense. And I agreed to do that. This involves writing papers, conference calls, emails. Actually, there were no physical meetings that I even attended in that process, but I was quite actively involved. And when the election was completed and Obama was elected, you know, you don't know whether there's any possibility you yourself might be asked to join the administration or not. Some people don't wish to join the administration. Some people are ambivalent. Some people would like to join the administration. I wasn't sure, but I was open to the suggestion. And after about a month, I was called and asked if I'd be considered for a job in the Pentagon. Since I already had a Senate-confirmed position, and how many of you know what a Senate-confirmed position means? Not too many, so I'm going to explain what that means. Because if you don't understand these details, you really can't understand how policy is made. And if you can't understand how policy is made, you can't evaluate the policies. In order to be a Senate-confirmed person, well, let me back up. When a president is elected, he's elected November every 4 years, right? We're going to have an election in November 2012. Let's say Obama's not re-elected. Let's say it's a Republican. Okay. How many people would the new Republican president actually bring in starting in January 2013? Do you have any idea? Probably reluctant to guess. Okay. I mean, is it 10 trillion people? Is it 3 people? Is it 500 people? 40 people? Okay. Okay. So how many people are in the federal government, all walks of life, on the civilian side? I'll skip over it all. We'll be here all night. There are 1.5 million federal workers, 1.5 million in every agency: IRS, agriculture, environmental policy, transportation, Social Security Administration. Every field you can think of, they're federal workers. They're not all in Washington, some are out here. Of the 1.5 million people, the vast number are career civil servants. They get a job, they stay there for their careers. When a new president comes in, he or she brings in about 5,500 political appointees. So there's a tiny little hot fudge on top of the vanilla ice cream. 5,500. And of those 5,500, 10% of those get confirmed by the Senate. So 550, 600. And across all agencies. Okay? So, and why do I care about the Senate-confirmed people? Because Senate-confirmed people are permitted to speak on behalf of the United States, and for the most part, no one else is. You have to be Senate-confirmed, or you have to be an advisor to the president in the White House to be able to speak to a foreign government on behalf of the United States. So when I was asked to be the Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary of Defense, I was told that I don't know if you recall, but Obama retained Secretary Gates as his secretary from the Bush administration. A Republican, a lifelong CIA officer, became the first career officer to become head of the CIA, was Deputy National Security Advisor to President George H.W. Bush, and he had been called back in by President Bush when Bush relieved Rumsfeld. And so Gates was the Secretary of Defense from the end of '06 through the end of '08, and Obama decided to keep him. Why? Because he was a sort of moderate Republican. He wanted a Republican in the cabinet. He wanted someone who would give him some credibility with the military, which Obama didn't have. He wanted someone who would give him credibility with the Congress, particularly the center-right in the Congress, which Obama didn't have. He wanted credibility with foreign defense ministers, which Obama didn't have. So Gates was retained. But Gates did make a condition to be retained, at least one condition. There may have been others. And that was he wasn't going to appoint people, the new Obama people, but he wanted right of first refusal. He wanted to be able to say, I want to interview the people who are going to be Senate confirmed and see if there's anything that bothers me about them. And if it does, I'll let the White House know. So I had to be interviewed one-on-one with the secretary before the whole process could even begin. That was the end of January 2009, 1 week after Obama came into office. And I had that conversation. It seemed to go well. I was then told by the White House, okay, we can now start the investigation of you. The investigation of a Senate-confirmed person is as intrusive as any investigation you'll ever have in your life. There's no aspect of your human existence, or your spouse or significant others, or your children, that is not fair game. Everything. Medical, financial, what you did politically, what you did academically, your health, everything. Nothing is out of bounds. They can ask any single question they want. They have a team of FBI agents who go, they might interview people who were your neighbors in 1984. Okay? They get raw documents. You have to fill out you have to fill out a stack of forms this thick about every aspect of your life. So right off the bat, a lot of people won't do that, don't want to do that. Or in the middle of it say, I'm not going to do it. Or in the process of the investigation, they are told by the White House, we don't want you to be in the government. Something may have happened years ago, and the government just doesn't feel, the White House doesn't feel they want to be embarrassed or have any problem with that. So that takes a while. In my case, it took till mid to late April of 2009. Then I was informed that my record was okay, and I would now be approved for the start of the Senate confirmation process. The Senate confirmation process involves, the Senate is, by the way, this is only in the Senate, not the House. We have 435 members of the House. We have 100 senators. The Senate, 100 senators are divided into committees and subcommittees. So I would not go in front of the same committee as Bob Reich went in front of when he was being confirmed to be Secretary of Labor. That's a Labor committee. I'm in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Last time when I was in the Clinton administration, it would be the Foreign Relations Committee. So I went in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Before you go before the committee, the staff wants to interview you, the staff of the senators, and sometimes you have meetings with members of the staff, and then you have meetings with the senators. So the whole point is it's an extremely laborious, extremely intensive, and extremely intrusive process, which is not everybody's cup of tea. You can be exhausted by the time you start the job. And in my case, all things got done, and I was able to start in early May 2009 as Assistant Secretary. Now, May is already 3 months into the administration, and the administration wasn't waiting for Michael. Right? Things were happening on all fronts. So you walk in, you're a member of a team, and while they're open to making changes, adjustments, criticisms, you're part of the team. You don't start off every day by saying, this is a dumb idea, this is stupid, I'm not going to follow this, Obama doesn't know what he's talking about there. You don't do that. You're either part of the team or you're not there. In my case, I was given 5 areas of responsibility. One was to lead the effort to produce something called the Nuclear Posture Review, which is a rethinking of U.S. nuclear strategy. The 3rd time this has been done since the end of the Cold War. And later that was finished with part of a whole team, went right to the President. The President reviewed 2 drafts of it. I was actually in my office in the Pentagon on Easter Sunday, 2010, proofing the final version that went to the White House for his signature. He made a big announcement. You may have missed it, but it was on the front page of the New York Times. And because he wants to draw down the numbers and hopefully get to 0 nuclear weapons, although this right now is more of an aspirational goal than a short-term reality. There was other work on missile defense and cybersecurity and space policy and countering weapons of mass destruction. So I was not directly involved in Afghanistan or in Iraq, which were, I think, primarily the very top priorities. But priorities change. If I were to brief President Obama in November 2008 and say, I think by 2011, your top issues in foreign policy are going to be that most of the Arab governments are going to be in chaos and several dictators who have been there for 30 or 40 years are going to collapse. And oh, by the way, Greece is going to default and the whole international economy and the American economy is going to be at risk. If I told him that in November 2008, he'd say, thank you very much, Michael, don't come back. Right? So you have to be flexible. You don't know what's going to happen. No one has a crystal ball. There are no conspiracies. There's no vast paradigm of pulling strings all over the world. All of this is Hollywood. It doesn't deal with reality. These are real people who have mistakes. They make mistakes. They have stomach aches. Their kids are angry at them. Life goes on, right? There are a set of policies that are set in place. Obama had a sort of middle-of-the-road policy on foreign policy. He did want to reach out to many other countries. He gave a major speech in Cairo to try to reach out to the Islamic world. He tried to push Israel a little bit to try to kickstart the negotiations with the Palestinians, and also press the Palestinians to be more accommodating to the Israelis. He was willing to talk initially to the Iranians through intermediaries about trying to thaw relations there, and with North Korea, relations there. A lot of these things didn't work. He tried it, they didn't work. The Iranians didn't respond, the North Koreans didn't respond, the Israelis didn't respond, the Palestinians didn't respond, and even the Islamic community has felt disappointment from that time to now. So if any one of these issues was easy, they would have been solved. They would have been solved. None of them are easy. They're all hyper-difficult problems. And I could tell you, because I know the hours I worked and the hours my colleague worked, it's not for lack of attention. Before I entered the government, people said, don't worry, Michael, it's a half-time job, 7:30 to 7:30. I said, oh. I said, well, but then they said, but you know what, it's not really 7:30 to 7:30, because 7:30 is when the meetings end, then you can start your work. So if you want to know my own case, and after all, I'm an upper-level person, but not the top person by far. I used to get up 5 or 5:30 in the morning. I would get to the Pentagon by 7 or 7:30, the absolute latest. The Pentagon also starts earlier than some other agencies. Meetings would begin immediately. Not only meetings, but there was some time to get intelligence briefings and other things would go on. This would go on until 7:30 at night. Then I'd review a bunch of documents and leave the Pentagon by 8:30 or 9 p.m. I'd go home and have some dinner with my wife. When I go home, I had three classified emails at work, which of course I couldn't use, but even my BlackBerry at home, I was able to receive sort of unclassified messages that were still important for me to attend to. And I would say after dinner at 10 o'clock at night, I got 5 to 8 emails that required deep thought and major substantive responses. Not just, hi, how are you, things are great. Okay. This would take till midnight or 12:30. I'd go to sleep at 12:30, 5 or 5:30, get up, do it again. So this is what's in store for you when you join the administration. Okay. It's not true every minute of every day, it's not true every single day of every year, but it's the norm. What I just described is the norm for political appointees in the national security part of the administration. It was true under Bush, it was true under Clinton, it was true under George H.W. Bush, it was true under many others. It goes back to Kennedy at least. It's very, very intensive. And the meetings are not just a bundle of laughs. You're dealing with very serious issues. I'll give you one example. July 4th, 2009, I was occupied. I thought I was going to be on vacation for the day. What had happened? What happened was that we were alerted that the North Korean government had sent a ship from North Korea that was headed to Burma with nuclear materials that clearly were not going to be helpful to U.S. policy or to anybody else's policy. So the question was, what do we do about that ship? We didn't know exactly precisely what was on the ship, but we knew it was bad stuff. There was a U.S. Navy vessel tracking it, but the Navy captain doesn't decide what to do about that ship. That's too important. Quote, Washington decides. Well, who was Washington? I was part of Washington. I wasn't alone. I was part of a 6-person group that were trying to figure out what that ship should do with the North Korean ship. Fortunately, we were able to finesse the problem, and it turned out that another government, which I can't disclose, was able to put pressure on the Burmese government not to allow the ship to dock in Burma, so they had to turn back. They refueled at sea, and they went home, what we call a cruise to nowhere. Some of you may have had cruises to nowhere. So this was finessed without a shot being fired. You know, if you start shooting at a North Korean ship, this could lead to war with North Korea. And if you think that's a problem, well, if you don't think that's a problem, North Korea now has missiles that not only could destroy Seoul and Tokyo in 30 minutes, but may have some missiles that could hit the Bay Area. It would get your attention. Okay? So senior people are involved in both operational issues, like I've described, and studies, and long-term policy and shorter-term policy. Besides Afghanistan, which remains an ongoing conundrum for the United States, and I'm happy to talk about that in the Q&A, and Iraq, where we are withdrawing, some would say prematurely, and some would say not quickly enough, there are many other issues. We do have a long ongoing festering relationship with Iran, which is getting more serious all the time. This goes back to '79, when Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew the Shah. You younger people don't know that there was the Iranian hostage crisis in 1979, which actually brought down the Carter government when he failed to rescue them. We've had a very acrimonious relationship since. They have quite a brutal regime. A lot of people are arrested, detained, tortured, or murdered. They have no free elections, although they claim that they're democratic. Ahmadinejad is an important figure as president, but it is Ayatollah Khamenei, the successor to Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the key architect. It's 9 mullahs, 9 religious Shia mullahs who make policy. And they are determined to become a dominant, if not the dominant player in the Middle East. They have an active nuclear weapons program. They're supporting Hamas and Hezbollah in the Israeli struggle. They're supporting forces in Iraq who are killing Americans. They're supporting forces in Afghanistan who are killing Americans. They're supporting terrorist groups of a variety of kinds. And now, most recently, was the allegation that they sent a mission to try to assassinate the Saudi ambassador, because Saudi Arabia is a deep rival of the Iranians. So managing the Iranian problem has been extremely challenging for the administration. It's not going to disappear, and the Israelis have been continuously nervous. Ahmadinejad has said on many occasions that Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth. They're the scum of the world. He wants to destroy every single Israeli. So, you know, if people say that enough to you, it's going to get your attention. So this is a very combustible issue, the whole Iranian foreign policy, and we've tried various ways to engage with them and ameliorate the policies. It has not worked. There have been, although the attribution is not yet revealed, cyber attacks against Iranian centrifuges, which have screwed up their weapons development program. This actually leads me to a discussion quickly about cyber. I mentioned cyber was one of my areas of responsibility. Cyber is a big deal. Cyber is potentially revolutionary for military technology and for warfare. You may know cyber because, you know, you have it's computer stuff, you have emails, you have Facebook and Twitter and all that. Okay. In the original conception of the internet, which was developed through funding by the Defense Department, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the late 70s, the idea was to have something for better military-to-military communication. It then got grabbed by the commercial sector, and the great figures like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and others produced a revolution in technology in Silicon Valley. And then you have Google that really began the web search. You have a whole sequence of developments in technology. What wasn't envisaged was, while the information would be fabulous to change our lives in so many positive ways, it could also be used for malevolent intent. Let me give you an example. Did anybody fly in here? Did anybody fly into SFO recently from anywhere? Okay. If you flew into SFO, your aircraft was guided by the air traffic controllers, and they're using computers to make sure that the runway is available when your plane is available and your plane lands safely, right? This happens a zillion times a day at airports all over the United States and all over the world. Supposing there were some malevolent characters who could screw up the air traffic controller system so that they said that the plane was clear to land and there were 3 other planes landing, okay, they would cause death and destruction. Okay? This is not a hypothetical example. It's a real capability now. Okay? Supposing I said to you, I like these lights, but I think it would be nice if someone attacked the electric power grid to just take out all the lights in Berkeley now for the next 2 years. People are working on this. Attacking the electric power grid of the United States is an ongoing project by various governments and some non-government groups. The main point is that the entire American society, more than perhaps any other society, is completely computer dependent. Financial systems, healthcare, transportation, every aspect of society is now computer dependent. If you can screw up the computers, the information that's provided, you can do tremendous damage to this country overnight. There are military examples. One government has been able to exfiltrate, that means take out, all the detailed information of a brand new US weapon system before it was even deployed, before it was even in the field. They got all that information, they put a team together, they built an exact replica of the system, exactly like our system. Then they figured out ways to improve it and also figured out ways to defeat it. So the moment the system is going to be introduced, it's going to be very vulnerable should there be a shootout with that other government. Okay. Supposing we said there was a crisis in the South China Sea with Taiwan, and we should send a carrier battle group to East Asia, which we've done before. Okay? But instead, the Pacific Command in Hawaii gets the message from Washington that the carrier needs to go quickly to Bermuda. That could happen. We get a tremendous amount of intelligence and communications and early warning from satellites. Supposing the satellites got knocked out of the sky, supposing they get dumbed down, supposing they get confused, supposing they get jammed. Well, I can give you many, many examples of this. But the core point is that the US computerized society is now increasingly vulnerable to cyber attack by others. And as a consequence of that, cyber warfare is emerging as the next dimension of warfare. And it's not just for the US, it's for major countries all over the world. The US is the first country to establish a combatant command, a group of military people, to develop a cyber military strategy. And in 2009, Secretary Gates established Cyber Command, Cybercom, which is in Fort Meade, Maryland. So this is new. This is Buck Rogers stuff. This is science fiction stuff, but it's happening now. And it's exciting, it's important, it's very demanding. It involves huge knowledge of technologies. And there are other aspects of it that we haven't even really begun. Could there be diplomacy that could ameliorate some of these problems? Could there be treaties that could govern behavior? If not treaties, could there be memoranda of understanding or codes of conduct? We don't really know yet. Congress is getting organized on cybersecurity. There are 53 different committees and subcommittees of the Congress that are dealing with cybersecurity. So you may or may not be aware of this. Some of you may be deeply knowledgeable. Others may not know much. But I point to this as a future dimension of warfare. I couldn't stand here 10 years ago and say what I just said. It didn't exist. It exists now. And the pace of change is exponential. Even exponential does not characterize the true rate of change. Besides these techie issues, we do have the Arab Spring. We do have very painful decisions whether to intervene in other countries or not. And then let me say a word about the economy, and then I'll stop. I don't think there probably were more than a handful of people in the world who expected that one individual who was a street vendor in Tunis, when his cart was confiscated by a Tunisian government official or police official, and who then committed suicide by immolating himself, that this would lead to a series of revolutions that have the entire Middle East in an extraordinary state of turmoil. But it's happening. It's happening right in front of our eyes, and it's not over. It's far from over. In Tunis, it led to the removal of the leadership, and now we've had an election, and we'll see what takes place. It was a free election, a fair election. It was monitored, and the prospects seemed good. There was an Islamic party that dominated, but it appears to have some Western values as well as Islamic values. And we're hopeful that relations with Tunis, which in general has been a moderate Arab state, will be good. Egypt, which is huge, the biggest and the most, in some ways, the most important Arab country, went through, as you know, an amazingly rapid revolution. And Mubarak, who had been president since 1981, that was 30 years, left in only 18 days, in part because the Egyptian army refused to fire on the Egyptian people, and Mubarak refused to actually order the Egyptian army to fire on the people, as far as I know. There were tragedies, there were atrocities, and he's being tried for them right now. But there wasn't a mass effort to stop the peaceful demonstrators by use of force. The future of the Egyptian political system is completely uncertain. By far, the most organized group is the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood was the group that organized the assassination of Sadat. Exactly what they'll stand for, if they're in power, we don't know. If there'll be a coalition government, we don't know. Egypt has had good relations with the United States now for many decades, and with Israel, they signed a peace treaty with Israel that has at least kept the peace for 30 years. They control the Suez Canal, one of the great waterways, one of the great choke points in global trade. So they're extremely important. And what we do know from the history of revolutions, if you study, like, for example, the Russian Revolution, is the group that overthrows the government is not necessarily the group that takes power. Right? The Russian Revolution, the Mensheviks overthrew the Tsar. The Bolsheviks overthrew the Mensheviks. And then they killed a lot of the Mensheviks. So the team that wins initially isn't the team that goes all the way to win the pennant or the World Series. Okay? We have this incredible drama that played out in Libya before our eyes just recently, with this slaughtering of Gaddafi at the end, very gruesome end for Gaddafi, who himself had slaughtered many of the Libyans. And what happened there ultimately was the U.S. was very reluctant to get involved because Libya has some oil, but Libya it was a small country. It's not strategically that significant. It's never played a big role in Middle East politics or the economy. And because we're fighting in 2 wars in 2 Asian countries, the military was opposed to U.S. intervention. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs told President Obama he did not think the U.S. should intervene. The Secretary of Defense Gates said we should not intervene. But Secretary of State Clinton was deeply concerned about the potential humanitarian catastrophe in Libya. Gaddafi said that he was going to go to Benghazi, which was the hotbed of the opposition. He said he called them all rats, and he said he was going to exterminate 200,000 of his own citizens. And it was within days of having the army there to do it. So ultimately, Obama sort of went halfway. He agreed that NATO, and the U.S. would be part of NATO, would conduct a no-fly zone. In other words, we would take control of the air, and we would bomb ground forces in Libya to prevent them from causing such a humanitarian catastrophe. This ultimately spread and led, it's a complex story, to the opposition forces gaining ground. They got weapons from various sources, and after 6 or 8 months of back and forth fighting, the rebels prevailed, and of course they took Tripoli in August, and they took Sirte finally just last month, and they finally got Gaddafi, and they're still searching for his son, his chief son's, the son who was the face of Libya, Saif, who was a graduate of the London School of Economics. And we'll see what happens with Libya. We'll see if they have a democratic regime. We'll see if they have a moderate regime. We'll see what happens with them. We have an ongoing struggle tonight in Syria. Bashir Assad, the son of Hafez al-Assad, the Assad government, Assad family has been in power since 1979. So that's what, 32 years. In academia, we call that tenure. Right? These guys have tenure. They get in off. You know, Gaddafi was a colonel who became president in 1928. And in most of these governments, their dictatorships, and the way the government changes hands is through force of arms and overthrow. There's no political succession process. There's no legitimized succession process for any of them. 22 Arab governments, none of them have had democratic regimes until we're witnessing it right now for the first time. And we don't know how Syria is going to work out. Tremendous brutality by Bashir Assad. Bashir Assad was a big hope. Bashir was a young man, very smart, tall, good-looking, London-trained ophthalmologist, a modern man, not a maniac, not a crazy guy, not a wild and crazy Islamic fundamentalist, not a fundamentalist at all, just a run-of-the-mill autocratic dictator and the autocratic dictator only has one objective and no other objectives, and it's to stay the autocratic dictator. It's the only objective. Everything else is subsidiary. You know, Gaddafi had people who were starving to death in this oil-rich country, and he amassed the current estimate. You know what Gaddafi's current estimated wealth was, according to the latest estimates I've seen? $200 billion, making him 4 times richer than any other person in the world. And people couldn't get medical attention. They had no educational system to speak of. They starved to death. Okay. This is what actually goes on in the real world. And this is what you have to deal with. There are tyrants all the time. There have been tyrants since human history began. There'll be tyrants as long as human history lives. And you have to recognize who you're going to have to confront and who you're going to have to just, hopefully others will confront or deal with. You have a similar problem in Yemen. I won't get into that. It's also a very dangerous and explosive situation. So how we're going to deal with this Middle East, there's a huge new challenge for American foreign policy. And it will outlast this first Obama term. He'll have to deal with it more effectively in the second term, or his successor will have to deal with it. You have the terrorism issue that continues. Terrorism is not fictitious. It's not fantasy. Ask the families of the 3,000 people who were killed in 2001. And the many people who've been killed elsewhere, in Bali, in Madrid, in London. Ask the people who might have been killed when the Detroit flight with the Nigerian who set off a bomb in his underpants, fortunately did it incorrectly, and it saved the lives of 290 people. Or speak to people in Times Square that night when the man drove the van into Times Square filled with explosives, ready to detonate it, the heart of Times Square on a Saturday night. It would have killed thousands of people, but he locked his keys in the car, he made other mistakes, didn't work. Speak to the families of the man from Fort Hood, a U.S. Army colonel on active duty, an American Muslim who had been converted to jihad by al-Awlaki, who was who's a key figure in Yemen. I'll talk about him in a minute. He's now been killed himself. And that man killed 35 people in Fort Hood. So there are huge numbers of threats to Americans, and not only to Americans, but particularly to Americans, from various groups that are inspired to cause death and destruction in the United States. Not to kill Americans per se, that's actually not the point. The point is to lead the U.S. to economic ruin. And maybe they're on the right path. Maybe they're on the right path. The U.S. has responded, and Obama even more than Bush, with very sophisticated use of intelligence, drones, special operations, to basically decapitate, to kill the leaders as much as possible, hoping that that will ultimately lead individuals to realize that this is not a winning strategy. Of course, the premier example of that is the killing of bin Laden on May 1st, 2011. This was a very controversial mission. It was a very high-risk mission. After all, Gates was in the room talking to Obama about it, and Gates had been in the room when Carter decided to rescue the hostages in Iran, and it failed, and it ruined his presidency. And Gates opposed the way the mission was conducted. He did not want the helicopters to land in the courtyard. He was fearful that there'd be too high risk, too many mistakes, too likely they'd be shot down, or the Pakistani government would get involved and all that. But Obama wanted to have proof perfect that it was bin Laden. The moment before Obama ordered the operation to go forward against bin Laden, he said to the Panetta, who was then head of CIA, he's now head of defense, Panetta, whose family ran an Italian grocery store in Monterey, who comes from this area, the large area, who's an amazingly smart, capable, sensible, politically savvy, talented guy. What's the probability bin Laden is even in the room, in the building? And they said from all sources that they have electronics, they've got surveillance, they've got satellites, they've got human intelligence. So the best we can give you is maybe 70%. So supposing it was you, supposing you're president of the United States, this is the man who orchestrated the killing of 3,000 Americans in 2001. This is the #1 criminal in the world we've been looking for. He's got all kinds of plans to kill more Americans. And your CIA director says there's a 70% chance he's in that house. Would you go forward with the plan? Because if you miss, if some of our American guys get killed, if they get found out, if they fail, the consequences could be catastrophic. Relations with Pakistan have already taken a deep dive since that time. Well, he agreed to do it. It was a high-risk strategy, and it worked. They killed bin Laden, a few other people. They got troves of information from the computer disks, and they got out, and not a single American was hurt, and they all made it back alive. Now, for those of you who might think America is the source of evil in the world, of course, this is a horrible thing. But for most of us, at least certainly myself, I thought it was the only way to deal with this man. There's no amount of – mediation, compromise, seminars, lectures, homework assignments, that's going to change his view. There's a whole history, how he got there. I teach a whole course developing the whole bin Laden theory, how he got to where he was, what his thesis is in detail, tremendous amount of detail. A lot of it's on the web. But I think there was no other way to deal with him. Now, after 9/11, Al-Qaeda splintered into fragmented and fractionated into many other groups because they were on the run. And the most active group became the group in the Arabian Peninsula, AQAP, which is the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, headed by al-Awlaki. Who was al-Awlaki? Is he some impoverished Arab who feels aggrieved for centuries of exploitation by the West? No. Al-Awlaki was born in New Mexico, U.S., New Mexico. He's a graduate of Colorado State University in civil engineering. He has a master's degree from San Diego State. He's a PhD student at George Washington University. But his father was a prominent Yemen academic. He went to Yemen and he became convinced that bin Laden had the right idea, that the West had exploited the Islamic world, not just the Arabs. Remember, there were only 300 million Arabs, but there are 1.2 billion Muslims. Remember, the Iranians are not Arab. The Iranians are Persian. And there's a Shia-Sunni split and many other dimensions to this. Al-Awlaki became an extraordinarily effective speaker, recruiter, fundraiser, project developer, planner for acts of terrorism against the West all over. He was very high on the list. He was attacked shortly after the bin Laden attack, but they missed him. They attacked him again with drones and they killed him, 38 years old. So he's a second key leader that's basically been assassinated. By the way, this is important for legal reasons too, because in order for the U.S. to carry out that threat, the president has assigned something called a finding, which means to say, I, the president of the United States, hereby request that the United States take all means possible, including use of force, to eliminate him. This is the very first time any U.S. president has ever written a finding for an American citizen, because Al-Awlaki was still an American citizen. He never announced his American citizenship. It never happened before in the 235-year history of the United States. So how to prosecute the war on terrorism continues. It will continue to morph. It will continue to change. And probably if I came to talk about it in 5 years, I'd be talking about a lot of different aspects of it. But this is not going to go away. I have grandchildren now. My grandchildren will be dealing with this issue. And this gets to another core issue I want to just cite in 30 seconds, which is I was originally an engineer, as Lillian mentioned. And engineers, how many are engineers in the room? Any? Oh, you got a whole bunch of engineers. Okay. So you know from engineering, just thinking pedagogically or almost educationally, and engineers like to look at a problem, move away all the clutter so you don't get distracted, get to the core issue. Then we've got a bag of tools, take out the tools from the toolkit, figure out what tool works, solve the problem, then you know how to solve it, and forget about it. Move on to the next problem. Okay? This is a sort of Cliff Notes version of how engineers think and work. I submit to you that the American people are engineers. We view the world as a bunch of problems. Got to get a tool, got to figure it out. I mean, during the Second World War, they said, this bad guy's running around with mustache, he's killing people. Let's go get him. We got him. Go home. This is actually not at all, since I shifted gears, not at all how international relations works. International relations is largely not a set of problems. International relations is a set of conditions that have to be managed. You can manage them better or manage them worse. It's like dealing with your mother-in-law. It's like dealing with an obstreperous child. It's like dealing with your cousin who you don't like. The problems are never solved, but you can make relations better or you can make relations worse. And the art of foreign policy is to improve relations. For the most part, problems don't get solved, but they can be better today than they were yesterday. This is not something Americans like to hear. They like to solve problems. We want to solve this. We want to solve that. We want to solve this. We want to solve that. Most of them are not going to be solved. If they're solved, you're lucky. That's good. So these are some of the issues that Obama is facing and will continue to face. And my final word then about the economy. When Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Mullen completed his term, he's the highest-ranking military officer in the United States, He gave testimony September 29th to September 30th, so what, 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago? And he was asked by a senator, what is the gravest threat to American national security now? What is number one? He's a 40-year man in the Navy, dealing with all the issues I've just talked about and many, many more. You might have guessed many of these things. And he said, by far, the most important threat to the U.S. is the weakness of the economy. That is the biggest threat. If the U.S. economy doesn't turn around, we're not going to be the same country. We're not going to have the ability to defend ourselves. We're not going to be engaged in parts of the world, constructively or not. And now you see what's happening. We've seen it in Oakland just last night. I mean, you have tremendous political and popular unrest and disruption for very good reasons. But the economic issue, which I'm not going to talk about, which you can get other experts to talk about, is actually now becoming increasingly corrosive for the ability of the United States to prosecute its foreign policy. The State Department has a $50 billion budget, 50, and if the super committee of the Congress doesn't reach agreement on November 23rd, which is 20 days from now, on a deal, the State Department budget cut will be $8 billion. $8 billion out of $50 billion. That means consulates are going to close, embassies will have less capability, the ability to prosecute foreign policy will be greatly reduced. The defense budget will go down by something like $50 billion or $60 billion a year for 10 years. There's no way you can continue to have the resources if you don't have the economic strength. This is by far the hugest challenge to Obama's foreign policy in the days ahead. So that's the good news. I hope I've laid out a few of the core issues. There's some positive news. Obama has accomplished a good amount in foreign policy. Ironically, foreign policy is not likely to play much in the presidential campaign. It's not clear that he's going to get much credit for it at all. Almost any of the issues I've discussed, you heard Herman Cain say the other day, I'm concerned that China may have nuclear capability when they first detonated in 1964. And you know what? Most Americans don't know about China's nuclear capability and don't care. They don't know, they don't care. They just know they get the T-shirt in Target from China. That's all they know. So foreign policy, this is true in the 92 election. I was involved in the 92 campaign with Clinton, and foreign policy didn't play much. Remember, Clinton said it's the economy stupid. It was all the economy stupid. So Obama has a quite, I think, all things considered, strong, enviable record on foreign policy. The Republicans will steer clear of it. They'll criticize it selectively where they think there's weakness, and they will just focus on the jobs issue. But that doesn't mean the world will stop. The world will continue. I haven't even talked about our Russian and Chinese friends and the fabulous relationships we have with them and the wonderful camaraderie we have with them and how we're all on the same wavelength and want the best for each other. This is the real world. The real world is tough, filled with characters who are bloodthirsty, who kill people, who suppress people. This has been going on for 5,000 years. It didn't start yesterday afternoon. And international relations is a struggle for power and influence among the great powers in this kind of environment. And the U.S. has a zillion problems. Just like Churchill said, democracy is a terrible form of government. It's just better than all the other governments. Right? The U.S. has got lots of weaknesses, but is the beacon of hope for people all over the world. And I hope that will continue, and I'm sure that will continue. And I'm delighted I-House plays a role in allowing people to come and exchange views in a free and open environment. And I applaud Lillian and her colleagues for providing this service and for this kind of series. Thank you. Would you like to